Okay, 1-7, midpoint and distance in the coordinate plane. So if you just had a line segment, AB, the midpoint is halfway between A and B. So we can just add A plus B and divide it by 2. When we are using the coordinate plane, so in other words, your x and x-axis, y-axis, then we have to use our points. So I have a point of 1, 1, 5, 5. So in our points, I'm going to add the x values together, divided by 2. Add the y values together to divide it by 2. And that way we've moved halfway across on our x, halfway across on our y-axis, and we'll find our midpoint. So we take 1 plus 5 divided by 2, and then we take 1 plus 5 divided by 2, because I used the same numbers. 6 halves and 6 halves, or 6 divided by 2, 6 divided by 2 is 3, 3. So 3, 3, so 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 is our midpoint. So you don't have to draw it out every time. Sometimes they will just give you a problem that you work out. So find the coordinate of the midpoint with endpoints at 2 and -5. So you want to take 2 plus the -5 divided by 2, so -3 halves. If you have coordinates, you want to do x values first, and it's always x, then your y. So 13 plus the negative, or just -6, divided by 2. 8 plus -6, or 8 minus 6, divided by 2. 13 minus 6 is 7 halves. 8 minus 6 is 2, divided by 2 is 1. And that's the coordinate of the midpoint. So sometimes they'll make it a little more complicated, and they'll say the coordinate of point T is given. The midpoint of ST is 5, -8. Find the coordinate of S. So we have our point T of 10, 18. We know to find our midpoint, so we did x sub m, y sub n, just to show that that is our midpoint. You take your x values divided by 2, y values divided by 2. So we know the midpoint is 5, -8. So we plug that in to 5, -8, because that was where our midpoint was. Our x value, the only one we had was 10. We don't have the other point of S yet. We have 18. We don't have y from our S yet. So we have to take that and set it up in our equation. So now I know that the x values here, 5, have to be 10 plus x divided by 2. And so I'm going to go 10 plus x divided by 2 equals 5. Multiply both sides by 2. So 10 equals 10x plus 2. Subtract our 10. And that gives me 0 equals x. Do the same thing with our y value of -8 equals the 18 plus y divided by 2. Come back, multiply both sides by 2. Cancels on this side. I get 18 plus y on the left, -16. And now I want to get y by itself, so minus 18. And when I subtract the 2, because they're both the same sign, add, carry the sign, -34 is my y. So that's how you find the midpoint, and now we need to find the distance. And with distance, we have a formula, again, to put it into. They come up with a formula by using Pythagorean theorem. So our formula is d equals, which d stands for distance, equals the square root of the two sides subtracted, so x 2 minus x sub 1 quantity squared, plus y2 minus y sub 1 quantity squared. Again, the subscripts are just to keep track of which points we're talking about. So, if I had a point 1, 1, a point 5, 4, and I was to find this length across from 1 to 5 is 1, 2, 3, 4. So I can actually take 5 minus 1 and get my 4. Same with my vertical height. I have 4 and 1, which is a distance of 3. 4 minus 1 is 3. I'm going to square them because Pythagorean theorem said hypotenuse squared is equal to the sum of the legs squared. So you have to square the legs, add them together, then take the square root. And that's all your distance formula is doing for you. So 4 squared means 4 times 4, so it's 16. 3 squared, 3 times 3 is 9. 16 plus 9 is 25. Square root of 25 is 5. So again, you're just substituting in to the equation. So find the distance between 2 points, round to the nearest tenth. Not always will they equal nice, neat whole numbers. So we have a point N, which was -1, -11. P is -1, -3. So when I plug it in, I want to take my x values, subtract them, and my y values and subtract them. So I started with this point first, -1 minus -1. So I put my parentheses around. So I did -1 minus, put parentheses, and then put my -1 in. And then -11 minus the -3. And we're coming back and squaring them once we subtract them. And when we subtract a negative, that's the same as addition. So -1 plus 1 is 0. -11 plus 3 is -8. 0 squared is still 0. -8 squared is positive 64. And now we're taking the square root, and we're getting back to 8. So the distance between those 2 points is 8. Takes much less time to go ahead and just plug it into the equation than to graph it. Just to make sure we have it down, do another problem like it. So my point Q is 12, 6. Point D, -8, 18. So 12 minus a -8. So I put in 12 minus the -8. We're going to square that. 6 minus, so it's 6 minus positive 18, and then we'll square that. So again, the two negatives make it a positive. You can rewrite it if you want. If you need to rewrite it, this other one, with your y values, you could actually subtract. 6 minus 18 was -12. So now I have 20 squared, because 12 plus 8 is 20. And -12 squared is 144. 20 times 20 is 400, plus 144 is 544. I'm going to take the square root of that, put it in your calculator, because it's not a nice, neat number, and you'll come out with 2.3, because I wanted it rounded to the nearest, well, I didn't even put that up so you could see it, rounded to the nearest tenth. So when you put that in your calculator, if you have a nice one, just make sure that with graphing calculators you have to hit the second key, then the square root, because it's in yellow. 544, enter. Again, to the nearest tenth, you go to the hundredth place, so we have 0.323. So I go to the 10th place, look to the 2, that's less than 5, so it drops off. So 23.3. I didn't bring another calculator with me, but just make sure. You can always practice. You know the square root of 25 is 5, or the square root of 36 is 6, so practice if your number goes in first, then your square root key, or your square root key, then the number, because each calculator works differently. Those are all my examples for 1-7. And now you may start the homework.